Good morning, world.
Good morning out there. Happy St. Patrick's Day. That wasn't even a...
That was a terrible
Irish accent.
What did that sound like to you?
Always after me, Lucky Charms.
I think the African is coming out in you.
I combined the two. Well, let's get into it.
Just so you know, this doesn't come out today, but we are filming on St. Patrick's Day today. We did have a...
Would you tell them why we can't wear green?
Yeah, we can't because of the green screen. As you know, ooh, is that a green screen? Yes, it is. That flag is on a green screen. So if we wore green, we'd fade into it. So happy day after Thanksgiving. Wow. I already had all my green
Someone's
beer.
got a little nip.
We already had our party. There's me and Cedric at our St. Patrick's Day bunko
I think we had
party.
another drink this morning before we started filming. Happy day after St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. So today what I'm talking about is Ben Shapiro. You know, the threatening Ben Shapiro. And the blind spot that I think Ben Shapiro has. I know, how could I say
Ben Shapiro's
that?
blind spot?
Ben Shapiro's blind spot.
That's the only lead-in we need.
That's right.
I'm Cedric.
And I'm Brian, and this is Cedric and Brian. All right, so before you hate me out there, for those of you who like Ben, I listen to Ben almost every day. He's a brilliant guy.
Understatement.
I agree with 99.9% of the stuff he does, that he says. But I listened to Ben before he became the Daily Wire Ben. He was on a local LA radio station talk show with two other people. I think there was one guy who was liberal, then there was a female on there who was conservative, and then Ben was the other conservative, if I've got the stations right. Ben was very anti-Trump.
Yes.
He
admits that.
He was like a never-Trumper.
Right.
And he admits it. He still doesn't like everything Trump says, as none of us do. Well, unless you're a true Trumpy, I guess.
Right.
But
he was a big fan of his financial policy.
yeah, he liked his policies.
Yes.
But he didn't like his tweets and all that stuff, which is understandable. Me and Cedric kind of fight about that too. I didn't appreciate a lot of that stuff because I think it got in the way of the message.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, so he liked it. I'm more of a Reagan guy. I like the smooth. But anyhow, but that's not what we're talking about today. I'm talking about Ben's attitude towards COVID. And again, I agree with Ben from the beginning. I've been listening to him, and he always talks about if you're under 30, your chances of dying from COVID are next to nothing. If you're under 15, you've got a better chance of dying from the flu than COVID. Right. Statistically, these are statistics. If you're 75 and older, yes, this was a terrible, terrible disease, and it killed people at a much higher rate than the flu. But Ben always said this: to treat everybody the same with this illness was ridiculous.
Right.
That's why schools should be open, and they're finally opening. But the blind spot Ben has, and this may be because his wife is a medical doctor, is he is so pro-vaccine for this, even though...
And this was news to me. You brought this up to me like 2 days ago, and I said, oh, is he?
Yeah, he even called out a guy on Blaze who questioned the vaccine, and Ben just said something like, just get the vaccine, you idiot. I mean, he was being the condescending asshole that I'm always accused of being.
Right. Is that a Jewish thing? Or
Shut up. Stop with the racism. But I could see Ben. I used to think of him as a kind of a condescending guy, but again,
which I love.
That being aside, he has the pedigree where I don't. He is a brilliant guy. But a couple things. He always talks about these studies coming out of Israel. And I was looking at him too, but what he doesn't talk about is the early studies coming out of Israel was kind of bad towards the vaccines, and then all of a sudden the narrative changed, and Ben always talks about this suppression of certain narratives. Well, the narrative changed, and all of a sudden Ben's only talking about how successful Israel is on the vaccine, and that it's 94 point something percent or 97, which how can you even judge if a vaccine's that effective when most people don't have a bad effect from this.
Right. It's so new that you really can't have a study out there saying this is how effective it is.
And how can it be effective? Let's say you give it to somebody who's 18, because I guess you can get it if you're over 18, that probably most athletes that get the test don't even know they have the disease. So how do you know how this vaccine actually treated it?
Right.
So Ben is just vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. And what's going to happen is what I've seen studying other vaccines, and maybe it's just because of the healthcare field that I'm in. When you look at a lot of vaccines in the past, the vaccines were invented. You see the curves, and we see it in COVID. I'm going to show you some graphs in a minute. The curves of the disease go up, and then they start to come down because of herd immunity. We've all heard that term, herd immunity. It comes down. Well, then the vaccines are invented and put out there already on the decline. So was it the vaccine that really brought it all the way down, or was it just natural herd immunity?
Right.
Of course, the pharmaceutical companies are going to take all the credit for it because that's where the money's at. I have a couple things, though, that I want to bring up with.
Yeah, you showed me a few of these graphs.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple things. And if those of you who've been watching for a while, I looked at Sweden. I know Sweden's one of the things that Ben used to look at. Ben's, in his original commentary, said, why don't we do what Sweden does?
Right.
Let things be open. Let kids go to school. The people that aren't vulnerable, let's live our lives, right? But now he's kind of saying, well, anyway, we'll get to the vaccines in a minute. So if you look up here is the daily new deaths in the United States. And this is over the whole pandemic. So you can look back here, and you can see that first curve back in March, April. That was our spike, and it looked really bad. And then all of a sudden we hit into the summer, the warmer months, and the curve started going down. And I'm using deaths, not cases, because cases, there's too many variables.
Right.
Cases is the amount of tests that are given. Deaths, you can't cheat, although you can, because if they attribute non-COVID deaths to COVID just because of the person. But let's just use deaths for the sake of
And everybody thought that, like, when we got into the warmer summer months, just like the flu and other bugs and stuff, that would eradicate it naturally.
And it did lower the curve. If you look at that first curve, it peaked there about May for the United States as a whole. But then look at that second spike. Okay, that was our next winter when the weather got bad.
Right.
So it went way down, peaked a little bit after July, and they say maybe it's because of the holidays. But then it stayed pretty much low through the hot summer months in the northern hemisphere. Then look at that spike. We had a massive second wave.
Now, during that time, was it attributed to a few things? One, the colder weather, and like you said, people gathering for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, people were gathering more together?
I contest that it's the colder weather, because if you look in the southern hemisphere, you'll see the spikes are the opposite on most countries. Okay. So those in the southern hemisphere, I think I looked at Argentina, things like that, when they still had the holidays, Christmas, but their Christmas is in summer.
Right.
Their numbers were lower. Then they spiked in the cooler weather. So you can deny it all you want. The weather makes a difference, just like it does with cold and flu.
Just like the flu.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now look at this one. This is Sweden, who everybody was demonizing. Notice their two peaks. Both their peaks are about the same height.
Yeah.
So they kept open. Their hotter months, it went almost completely away. You can see that the deaths are almost down to nothing.
So that valley there is their summer months.
Their summer months. So you can see that August. And then all of a sudden it get colder. We get into cold and flu. And look at their second wave is about the same as their first. Not like us. If you look back at the first one again, our second wave, we locked down. Much worse. It's because people are going to get the disease.
Right.
Now, here's where I have a problem with Ben. Ben's going to look at that, and he keeps saying it on his podcast right now. Well, look at when the vaccines are being rolled out. Look at those numbers dropping. Well, last year, after the initial spike, they dropped just the same. We had no vaccine. So, Ben, is it actually the vaccines, or is it because it's going through this normal cycle of hotter weather, viruses, cold and flu viruses go down? Right?
It'll be interesting to see a graph on that, on how the cold and the flu, what that graph looks like.
Yeah, I know that people aren't releasing that. It's hard to find. Right. So then I wanted to take one more step here, and then let's get to this. Okay, so now I want to compare California and Florida.
Okay.
Florida, the demonized
yes,
right, state.
Yes.
They pretty much left it open. So let's look at Florida. So there's your Florida graphs. These are deaths. You can see two spikes there. They're about the same. Now remember that I'm doing California and Florida.
Right.
Same types of population. Florida actually has an older population. California actually has worse deaths per million than Florida. But notice how those
And this is Florida.
This is Florida. So that's Florida right there. Notice how both the spikes,
They're about the same.
They're about the same. In fact, Florida, the spike was more in the hotter months on that first spike. But look at that second spike. It's actually less than the first spike.
Right.
Okay? Because they left it over, the people that are going to become immune, people that are going to get it, going to get it. People that become immune are become immune. Herd immunity. And you can't say, oh, yeah, well, they just killed off more people. Well, they did not. They didn't kill more people than California. Now look at California.
Cuomo did.
Yeah. Right.
That's a different story.
New York is the second highest deaths per million.
Right.
And then first is New Jersey.
Right.
They both had basically the same policies. All right, look at California. We didn't have much of a spike at the beginning of this thing for deaths. Look at that second spike.
Wow.
All right? We're the ones who closed down. Total deaths are about the same. So that's where I agreed with Ben. We should have left things open. But then you look at how everything is going down, and the pharmaceutical companies are going to do like they did with a lot of the past vaccines, and they're going to say, look, we're eradicating this thing because of vaccines. Only time will tell, obviously. Speaking of vaccines, I had a patient come in, and this what makes it hard to trust medical professionals. I mean, this has made it hard anyways. You had Fauci and you had all these people. She came in, half of her face completely paralyzed. She had Bell's palsy. She couldn't talk when she first woke up, and it was coming. She had a sore neck, sore arm, sore neck, and a week after the vaccine, complete Bell's palsy. She can't even blink out of the one eye right now. She went to her medical doctor, first one that gave her the vaccine. Nah, it's not from the vaccine. Coincidental.
Coinky dink.
Yep. So then she went to her primary care because she was getting really worried. Yeah, that's only Bell's palsy. Was it from the vaccine? No, it has nothing to do with the vaccine. How can you trust doctors when we know that that is a side effect? It's a stated side effect, and then you have two medical doctors telling her, no, not from the vaccine.
Right.
Complete paralysis to the side of your
Well, I sent you that story a couple of days ago about the lady in Utah, a 39-year-old woman who passed away 4 days after the second vaccine.
Yep.
Coincidence? Would it have happened anyway? We don't know.
Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Yes, 66 years old, great fighter from the 80s.
And if you look at Tommy Hearns, sent out a tweet before Hagler died, when Hearns went to the hospital and said, hey, I heard you're having a rough time from the vaccine, but you don't see that in the news.
No, you're not going to see that in the news.
But that came out before he passed away. Now that he's passed away, that's all going to be scrubbed because they don't want you to know. And I'm not saying...
At the beginning of this video, I told Brian, I said, okay, you run with this. You're in the medical profession. Are you saying that people should not get the vaccine, or you're saying do what you want to do?
And here's where I'm going to conclude this, because this is where I part ways with Ben. You do what you feel is right, but for a government or for an establishment to tell you this is something you have to do when we know there's side effects, we know people are dying, and Ben always says, well, it's a minuscule amount of people dying. Well, it's a minuscule amount of people dying under the age of 30 from this thing. This 39-year-old woman probably would not have died. You know, nobody knows for sure. She probably would not have died from COVID. Right. By all accounts, she had no underlying conditions. She was a healthy, thin 39-year-old woman.
Right.
So for Ben to say, just go get your damn vaccine, when there's these studies, and then Ben, I don't know if you've seen this. This was on one of the Blaze shows. I'm going to show this real quick here. So if you're looking at this video, these are people in Israel.
Yeah.
They have what's called, I think it's called the green card.
Yes.
They have to show a QR code to get into this museum, I believe, or whatever it is, a mall. They have to show that with a QR code, and then they are given a little badge that they put on to say that they're okay to shop. Now
that's really weird.
Yeah, for a Jewish state to have to show your papers to be admitted to do something does not seem like a very good thing to me, and it's just the the irony hits you in the face.
Yeah. Not making light of it, but you've been numbered.
Yeah, and
you've been branded.
And which means it's probably going to come here, and people like Ben, and Ben, I love you. People don't yell at me. I love everything that Ben's talked about, except for this. For somebody to say you have to do this, and people say, well, the government won't make you do it. But if the airlines make you do it, if the amusement parks make you do it, it's like vaccinating your children. Right. Oh, they can't mandate it, but guess what? Kids can't go to school.
Can't go to school.
My son could not go to college, the college of his choice, until he got another vaccine. So don't tell me that the government's not making you do it. With enough pressure, it's basically forced vaccination. In Israel, it's basically forced vaccination if you want to, be in society.
Right.
So Ben, I'm sorry. These aren't FDA approved yet, and even if they are, I don't care if it's an FDA approved. Even FDA approved vaccines have a whole fund set aside by the government to pay out for injuries caused by vaccines, and it's because you can't sue the vaccine companies. Mm-hmm. So that's the blind spot Ben has. Again, I agree with 99.9% of what Ben usually says. But I'm sorry, I part ways here, and when I see what's going on in Israel, it's pretty scary. And for them not to be scared in a country like Israel, who had to create a country because of things like this, it shouldn't be lost on you. And again, if you want to get the vaccine and take the risk, you do your own risk assessments, go do it. You do what you need to do. But for society, and it doesn't have to be government, for society, if you need to go to the mall like in Israel, if you want to go on an airline, which they're throwing that around, to travel you have to have a vaccine, that's just wrong. That means you can't function in society without doing what they want you to do.
Okay.
So that's just my
advice.
That's
No, you did your homework. That was well said. Brian and I, his wife, and a friend of mine, were going to Tennessee in April, and I was going to reach out to the Daily Wire to see if we can stop by and pay a visit. Ben, if you see this video, you can let me in. Brian can sit in the car.
Well, Ben's in Florida.
All right, Ben's in Florida. He may be out there just visiting, see how things are going.
You want to see Candace, and you know it.
I'd see Candace. I'd like to meet Candace Owens.
We would like to meet Candace Owens and Matt.
Matt and the whole crew. Clavin.
Don't leave out, yeah. Yes. Andrew, and don't leave out.
What I'm saying is you may have screwed that up, but that's all I'm saying. But now Ben's the type of guy Ben's the perfect example of someone like we can have disagreements, but we can still get along.
Yeah.
He's that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
but he might call us dumbasses for not getting our vaccine, because I believe that's what he called the other guy.
Us hell.
But whatever.
Call him.
But before we go, let's do our comment of the day.
Oh, yes, indeed. Okay. Our comment for the day, we recently put out a video that talked about a school in New York that was asking its kids not to use the words mom and dad, and they want to be more inclusive. That was the buzzword. Anytime you hear the word inclusive, look over your shoulder, run. This comes from a gentleman by the name of Sims Reject. He leaves a lot of comments, and he says, when asked how to end racism, Morgan Freeman replied, stop talking about it. This goes for all the isms, which is why the left keeps them front and center. We can't upload it, but Brian and I actually did a parody of that famous interview with Morgan Freeman and Chris Wallace.
Yeah, it's on our TikTok.
It's on TikTok. If you can't, we basically replayed it. I played Morgan Freeman, played Chris Wallace, and it was kind of funny because some people thought that
Mike Wallace, sorry. Some people actually thought that
that's something we did.
Yeah.
Like, no, I copied Morgan Freeman, he copied Mike Wallace, and we just said the same thing they said.
And and purposefully, I had a picture of that interview next to me during it, so people could see Morgan Freeman in it, just in case they didn't catch on.
But if you didn't catch that interview with Morgan Freeman, basically said, stop talking about it. Some people left comments like, oh, that sounds very easy. It doesn't mean it'll go away automatically, but if you notice, and like this gentleman put, the isms, we talk about it with everything. Let's not talk about it as much. You know, Brian sees me as Cedric. I see him as Brian. We don't talk to each other as black and white. We talk to each other as men who are in the world trying to accomplish similar goals.
But sometimes we joke around about it, which you can't do anymore.
Yeah, we do anyway.
We grew up with Archie and the Jeffersons, so we can do that.
Yes. So a lot of people like say, oh, you guys, your friendship, you guys are so genuine. I've said it before. When this stops rolling, we turn the camera off. You guys don't want to hear some of the things we say to each other. Brian's wife doesn't want to hear some of the things that we say to each other. She's like, I can't believe you guys are friends.
My wife doesn't want to hear the things I say to her.
But anyway, thank you guys for checking out our video. Make sure you like, Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell and share our videos with everyone you know.
And comment.
Yeah,
please comment.
Yes, we
good,
love
bad,
it.
indifferent comments.
Yes. Until next time, I'm Cedric.
And I'm Brian. We'll see you later.